Jacob was very pleased with Cole's offer.
I don't want to take advantage of you. I'll let you have the painting for $60,000.
Julian chuckled and put his arm around Jacob.
You're not taking advantage of him. It's pocket money for him. He can afford it.
All right then.
We have a deal.
Cole took out his checkbook and handed Jacob a check for the agreed amount. Jacob's face turned red with excitement. His hand trembled slightly as he took the check. He couldn't believe how much money he had made that day.
It's not that big of a deal.
Jacob put away the check and smiled.
Maybe it's not a big deal to rich guys like you two, but this is the most money I've ever had.
Cole laughed and let out a sigh.
Getting this painting makes me think my luck has finally started to change.
Cole had only just finished speaking when a strong gust of wind blew by. Cole struggled to keep hold of the painting as something blew into his face unexpectedly. He reached up and pulled it off. He was mortified to see a pink pair of lacy underwear and threw them down in disgust. Jacob and Julian burst out in uncontrollable laughter.
Just when I thought things were looking up for me.
Cole said. Jacob was intrigued and looked intently at Cole. Using his newly acquired talents, he saw what appeared to be a spot of blood on his forehead. He knew that meant Cole was headed for a bloody disaster. Although he had only just met Cole, he liked him and didn't want to see him come to harm.
You sound like you've been through a lot lately, Cole.
You don't know half of it. I've had the worst luck the last several months. I lost money on some bad investments, my tires were slashed, and I had a car accident that ended up with me in a ditch. I only just recently had the cast removed from my wrist that I hurt in the accident.
I wonder if it's more than just bad luck. Maybe you've been cursed and need to find someone to lift it.
My father is stubborn and doesn't believe in that kind of thing. He won't allow me to seek a practitioner's help.
Jacob thought for a moment about how he could help. A crystal caught his eye in a shop window across the street, and it gave him an idea. He hurried into the shop to buy it. He secretly cast a spell of safety and protection on the crystal, and sealed it by shaking it in the air. He worked surreptitiously, so no one saw him. Jacob handed the crystal to Cole and said,
Legend has it that these crystals have magic powers that protect you from evil. I want you to have it and keep it with you. Think of it as your good luck charm.
Cole was moved by Jacob's thoughtful gift. He took the crystal and put it into his pocket. Cole's phone rang before he could thank Jacob properly.
I'm sorry, but I have something I have to take care of right away. However, I'd like both of you to come meet me at Club Green this evening if you're free.
Okay, go ahead. We'll see you tonight.
Julian said. Jacob and Julian stayed and talked for a few minutes before they parted ways. After saying goodbye to Julian, Jacob went directly to the bank to deposit his checks. He had never had so much in his account before. It may have seemed like a small sum to others and wouldn't go far in an expensive city like Oakdale, but to someone poor like him, it made a tremendous difference. Club Green was well known in Oakdale City. It had everything from food and entertainment to a gym and a spa. Jacob arrived right on time and saw Cole and Julian waiting outside. They all walked toward the front door together. Jacob knew that a place like that required membership and was expecting to be stopped by the security guard. Instead, the guard nodded and let them walk right in. Julian could see the confused expression on Jacob's face and explained.
Cole's dad owns Club Green.
At that moment, Jacob realized just how wealthy Cole's family was. They went into a private room where Cole invited them to sit down.
Let's eat first, and then we'll go upstairs for an antique auction. Mr. Williams is also holding a jade fair here tomorrow. You're welcome to come to that too.
Julian's eyes lit up when Cole mentioned jade.
My dad could really use some new materials. Maybe I'll get lucky.
Julian's father was in the jewelry business and ran a chain of stores across the country. They were famous for their exquisite jade pieces.
We can talk about business later. Let's eat.
The food served at Club Green was prepared by one of the best chefs around. He could take ordinary ingredients and turn them into something exceptional. The three friends sat and enjoyed the delicious meal. Cole and Julian both liked to drink. They weren't like their fathers, who enjoyed expensive bottles of wine. They preferred something stronger, like whiskey. Cole ordered a bottle of the finest bourbon to share. Jacob didn't drink much at first but gave in to the pressure, and before long, the three of them had finished the entire bottle. Jacob started to feel dizzy and knew he was drunk. He felt his stomach churning, so he got up and hurried to the bathroom. He used the energy practice he had learned from his ancestors to force the alcohol out of his system through sweat. Once the nausea had abated, he let out a sigh of relief. He was about to go and wash his face when the bathroom door flew open. He heard a scream and saw a waitress being pushed in. A man with a devious smile and some of his friends followed her in. They blocked the door to prevent her from escaping. The waitress was terrified.
Stop! Why are you doing this to me?
A nefarious smile appeared on the man's face.
I asked you to have a drink with me, but you refused. I'm going to make you pay for embarrassing me in front of everyone.
One of his friends joined in.
That's right. Don't you know who he is? You should be honored that Wyatt Damon even noticed you. Let's get this party started, Wyatt.
Why are you in such a hurry, bro? It's much more fun to take things slowly, especially with someone as beautiful as she is.
He grabbed her shoulder.
Don't do this, please. I'm just a student.
She started to cry and tried to break free from Wyatt, but he was too strong. Seeing her struggle made Wyatt laugh.
I always get what I want. It makes no difference to me who you are.
Please, let me go. I'm begging you.
He took a cup from one of his friends and handed it to her.
Have a drink first, and if you still don't like me, I'll let you go.
She shook her head. She knew exactly the type of people they were, and knew the drink was likely drugged.
There's no way I'm going to drink that.
Well, I'm afraid you have no choice.
Wyatt turned and winked at his friends behind him. They held her down while Wyatt began to pour the drink down her throat. Jacob had seen enough. He stepped out of the stall and coughed.
I'm sorry to interrupt your little party. Do you have room for one more?
They froze for a moment when they saw him.
Who the hell are you? Get out of here. Don't you see we're in the middle of something?
Megan, is that you?
Jacob asked. He didn't usually get involved in things like that, but he thought that the waitress looked familiar. He realized it was his high school classmate, Megan Lang. She was also studying at a university in Oakdale City. She didn't come from a rich family and was probably trying to earn some money during the summer break by working at the club.
Jacob, please help me.
Megan broke free, ran, and hid behind Jacob.
Dude, you'll get out of here if you know what's good for you.
Wyatt was frustrated that Jacob had ruined his good time, but he also knew they didn't let just anybody into Club Green. He had to be careful about whose toes he might step on.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Wyatt Damon, and who, may I ask, are you?
Jacob put his arm around Megan and then looked at Wyatt.
I'm Jacob Ye.
Jacob Yee? I've never heard of you.
Wyatt paused for a moment. He wanted to make sure he hadn't forgotten about an important family in Oakdale City with that name. He took another close look at Jacob, and seeing how he was dressed, decided he was a nobody.
I'm going to warn you one last time to hand her over and get out of here.
And what are you going to do about it if I refuse?
Wyatt's face darkened, and his smile faded.
My friends are going to teach you a lesson so that you know you've messed with the wrong guy.
Wyatt signaled to his friends. Two of them rushed at Jacob and tried to grab him. Jacob reached out and grabbed both by acupressure points in their necks. He gave a slight squeeze and let go. Both men crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Wyatt was furious to see his friends defeated. Two others ran toward Jacob, ready to fight. Jacob wrapped his foot behind the knee of one of them and used it to pinch the nerve. The leg immediately gave way, sending him flying backward into Wyatt and the other friend. All three fell hard on the floor. Wyatt had never seen his gang defeated like that.
How dare you? You'll pay for this.
Someone outside had heard all the commotion and called security. The team of security guards came bursting in. The head of security saw Wyatt on the floor and quickly helped him up.
Mr. Damon, are you all right? Who did this to you?
Jacob was standing with Megan.
It was me. These men were hurting my friend, and I defended her. Is there anything wrong with that?
Officer Landrum, show this guy what happens when he messes with me.
I understand.
Officer Landrum answered. He stared at Jacob and waved for his men to attack. The guards took out their batons and surrounded Jacob and Megan.
Are you really going to beat me up instead of the people who are actually guilty of a crime?
Jacob asked. Officer Landrum knew how powerful Wyatt and his family were.
You should have never messed with Mr. Damon. You brought this on yourself.
He raised his baton and swung it at Jacob's head. Jacob caught it and twisted his hand, making him drop the stick on the floor. Then he knocked him to the ground with a swift kick to the leg. Officer Landrum held his hand in pain.
Boss, are you okay?
One of the guards asked. He rushed over to help him up immediately. Officer Landrum grunted as he stood up and pointed at Jacob.
Get him.
The security guards tapped their batons in their hands and moved toward Jacob slowly. Suddenly, Cole burst in.
What the heck is going on here? Leave my friend alone.
Cole and Julian had waited for a long time for Jacob to return. They were worried he had gotten lost, so they had come to look for him and walked into the bathroom just in time. The guards quickly put away their weapons and greeted Cole. Officer Landrum's face turned bright red. He had only wanted to please Wyatt and had never expected Jacob to be friends with his boss's son. He knew he was in big trouble. Cole shouted,
What do you need this?
Mr. Lambert, please forgive me. I would have never done it if I had known he was your friend.
There was nothing Officer Landrum could say to persuade Cole.
You're fired. Pack your shit and leave immediately. I will see to it that you never work in Oakdale City again.
Officer Landrum hung his head and left. Cole looked at Wyatt and his friends with disgust and crossed his arms. He took one look at Megan hiding behind Jacob and knew exactly what had happened.
Well, well, well. If it isn't Mr. Damon.
Wyatt looked at Jacob and rolled his eyes.
Cole, you can't tell me you're actually friends with a lowlife like this guy.
You say one more word about him and I'll rip your tongue out. Who I choose to be my friend is none of your business. I've warned you not to hit on the waitresses here. Club Green isn't that kind of place, and I'm not going to put up with this kind of behavior.
Cole and Wyatt had never gotten along. The only reason Wyatt came to the club was for the auctions and precious stone fares. He looked at Cole with contempt.
Your friend is the one who started it. He just came in and started beating us up for no reason.
You should be thanking me for taking it easy on you.
Who do you think you are? Don't take that arrogant tone with me.
Wyatt, I think it's best if you leave my friend alone.
Wyatt turned to see Julian glaring at him. He was shocked to find out Jacob knew Julian too. Cole and Julian were just as rich and powerful as he was. He decided it would be best to drop it for the time being.
I'm not going to waste any more of my time with this guy. Just stay out of the way.
He warned Jacob. He waved to his friends to follow him out.
Are you okay, Jacob?
Yes, I'm all right.
Let's go.
Megan had been feeling dizzier with each passing minute. Finally, her legs gave out and she would have collapsed onto the floor if Jacob hadn't caught her.
What's wrong?
Jacob asked. She tried to answer but only managed to get out a few slurred words. She felt very hot and uncomfortable. She wanted desperately to get out of her clothes. Jacob remembered that they had forced her to drink something. The drugs must have just started to kick in. He quickly took her pulse and knew she was in trouble. He looked at Cole nervously.
Can you arrange a room for me to take her to?
No problem at all.
Jacob helped Megan into the room and sat her down on the bed. She was burning up and couldn't see straight. She started to try and undress.
It's so hot in here, Jacob.
She murmured. She started to take off her uniform. Jacob gulped nervously. His newfound powers had made him a lot stronger than he was before, but it was almost impossible for him to suppress his desire as he watched her. Jacob slapped himself to gain control. He thought,
What are you doing? You're a doctor. Get it together.
Jacob took Megan's pulse again. The drugs Wyatt had put in her drink were strong and were causing her heart to beat very fast. She stood up all of a sudden and pulled Jacob onto the bed. She wrapped her legs tightly around his waist and tried to kiss him.
Megan, snap out of it. You don't really want to do this.
He saw the confused look in her eyes and kicked himself. As a professional, he couldn't possibly take advantage of her in that state. He quickly broke free and laid her flat on the bed. He gently pressed at one of her acupuncture points. Her eyes slowly started to widen as she regained a bit of clarity. She started to toss and turn.
Jacob, help me. I don't feel well.
Just hang on. Be strong. I'm going to try a treatment that will make you feel better soon.
No, I don't want you to treat me. I want you. I've wanted you since high school.
He was shocked by her confession and smiled. They had sat together in class for 3 years and had been friends. But he had a girlfriend back then, and after graduation, he and Megan had lost contact with each other. Jacob shook his head and pressed her neck gently. She took a deep breath and fell asleep instantly. He was relieved to see her resting and sighed.
I'm sorry, Megan. I couldn't help you unless you stayed still.
He took out his bag of acupuncture needles and began sticking them into several points on her head. It only took a few minutes for him to finish. His cell phone rang. Julian was calling to inform Jacob that the auction was about to begin. He asked him to meet them at the auction center upstairs. Jacob left Megan sleeping peacefully in the room. Cole had informed the security guards about Jacob, so they let him in with no questions asked. He walked in and saw a few others had already arrived, including Wyatt. Wyatt was angry to see him there but couldn't do anything about it because he didn't want to get kicked out of the auction. Jacob saw an old man with gray hair at the front of the room. He looked very familiar. Jacob was sure he had seen him on an antique appraisal show. If it was him, he must have been there to appraise the items being auctioned off that day. Jacob sat beside Julian while Cole asked the old man questions about the painting he had bought. Julian told Jacob the old man's name was Mr. West. Mr. West inspected the painting carefully. After a few minutes, he reached his conclusion.
This painting is the work of the late Ben Gaultier. It's extremely rare and, as such, very valuable. You don't need to auction it. I'll buy it from you.
Sorry, Mr. West, I don't intend to sell this painting. I want to keep it for myself.
Mr. West was disappointed to hear that, but took it in good stride.
Oh, I see. You had me appraise it just to make me jealous.
Other people lined up to present Mr. West with their items. He looked over each piece carefully. Everyone knew he was a true expert and trusted his opinion. Wyatt approached him and took out a ceramic vase.
I had Kyle Shaw appraise this already, and he seemed to think it's a fake, but I'm hoping he's mistaken. I wanted to get a second opinion. I hope you can help me to clear up any doubts.
Mr. West smiled and shrugged.
Kyle knows his antiques. If he thought that this is a fake, I doubt he was wrong.
Jacob's ears perked up when he heard Kyle Shaw mentioned. He remembered that was the name of the man he had met earlier at the antique market. Wyatt pointed out one of the marks on the top of the vase.
Mr. Shaw only noticed this flaw on the side. Please take a look and see if there are any other defects.
Mr. West took the vase and examined it carefully.
The only flaw I see is the one you just pointed out. I have to agree with Mr. Shaw. If it weren't for that flaw, it would definitely be mistaken for an authentic. It's a quality imitation, but unfortunately, it has no value.
Wyatt shook his hand and smiled.
I paid a few $1,000s for it at an antique market. I thought I had a good eye for spotting fakes, but I'll have to take this as a lesson learned.
Wyatt played it off as no big deal, but deep down, he wanted to throw the vase on the floor and watch it shatter into a million pieces. He could afford to lose the money. He just didn't like to be deceived. Jacob saw through Wyatt. He had to speak up before he did anything to damage the vase.
Wait! Let me have a look at that.
Wyatt huffed and rolled his eyes.
Since when do the poor take an interest in antiques?
Mr. West smiled at Jacob.
Antiques are an art form to be appreciated and admired by all, regardless of wealth.
You're right, Mr. West.
Wyatt said. He didn't want to lose face in front of the other important people there, so he handed the vase over to Jacob. Jacob took the vase and studied it. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than met the eye. Ever since he had inherited his new powers, he could sense what ordinary people could not. His ability to see the aura of the Gaultier painting had shown him that every antique work of art had a soul. Each soul was represented by something different, and he could feel the presence of them deeply. Jacob wasn't sure what made this vase so special. He just knew he had to listen to his gut. He wanted more time to get to the bottom of it, so he asked Wyatt if he would sell the vase to him. Wyatt sneered.
It's just an imitation and not worth any money at all. I'll give it to you if you like it, since you can't afford an authentic one.
You paid for it, and it wouldn't be fair to you for me to take it for free. Name your price.
Wyatt frowned, upset that Jacob had mentioned that he had spent money on a fake. He resented people knowing he wasn't skilled at evaluating antiques.
Have it your way. I'll sell it to you for the same price I paid for it, $3,000.
He offered that price, thinking that Jacob couldn't even afford $300. But he was speechless when Jacob readily agreed.
Okay, I'll send you the money now.
Wyatt gave Jacob the details needed for the transfer. While Jacob was busy sending the money, Wyatt took the opportunity to insult him again.
Only a poor person would treat an imitation like a treasure. You've probably spent half of your life to earn $3,000.
Jacob frowned at Wyatt but didn't reply. Julian knew that Jacob wasn't wealthy and wouldn't have been able to afford the vase if he had not just sold the painting to Cole. He leaned over to whisper to him.
Did you sense something special about this vase?
Jacob nodded slowly.
Yes, I just don't know exactly what it is yet.
Mr. West overheard the conversation and was a little offended by it. Two experts had already identified the vase as a worthless fake, but Jacob was still insisting it had some hidden value.
I hope you'll let me know if you find something I've missed,
he said, somewhat annoyed.
I just thought there was something odd about it. It might not be anything, Mr. West.
He replied politely. Mr. West shook his head.
Everyone thinks they're an expert nowadays.
Jacob ignored Mr. West's sarcastic remark, even though he felt it was a little uncalled for. He turned the vase upside down and found a very thin layer of rubber on the bottom. He suddenly understood what he needed to do.
Did you find something?
I think so. Do you have a pocket knife?
Cole reached into his pocket, took out his knife, and handed it to Jacob. Jacob used it to gently prod the rubber seal. He felt the tip of the blade hit what he was looking for. He pushed down with the knife and lifted the rubber to reveal what was underneath.